Hey, everybody. Welcome to CRE Chat Live. Thank you for tuning in. It's been a while since Melissa and I have released a podcast, but we are so excited to have Diane Danielson with us today. She was the co-host of our CRE Chat back in March, and a lot has changed since March 17th when we had her as our guest host to cover International Women's Day. But before we jump into our CRE Chat recap that we typically do, I know, Diane, you made a huge transition in the middle of this pandemic. So if you want to introduce yourself and tell us what you've been up to.
Yeah, I think a lot of your followers might know me as the former COO of SVN International Corp. And I have spent probably 25 years of my life in and out of commercial real estate. And I decided in the past year that I wanted to pivot a little bit. And right now I've launched something called, it's a research collaborative think tank called Future Proof Research Collaborative. And I'm working with companies and other professionals to help leaders and companies and entities that are focused on the way business is going to be. And definitely everything from environmental filters to sustainability to inclusion, all of those great topics that people circled around. But I think COVID is actually making us focus on a lot of details, which is probably what we're going to talk about. So we'll bring that up. So I'm working with a renewable energy company right now, and I'm hoping to do more.
Yeah, that's a huge question right now, is what is the future of business? So I think it's an excellent time for you to pivot into that, into your transition. So what has that transition been like during COVID?
Well, I have lots of those late nights waking up like, oh my God, what am I doing? Because, I did stay on to help SVN, and because they have we actually work virtually at our headquarters to begin with. So we were pretty good on that. So, at night I worry about what am I doing, but then the fact that I feel like COVID transitioned us 10 years into the future in 4 months. So it couldn't be timelier. And I have to admit, I am going back to University of Washington online to get a master's certificate in sustainable transportation and livable cities. So I'm not leaving real estate totally. I just want to look at the planning for our future work.
Well, you never cease to amaze Casey and I. You just have so much wisdom and knowledge. And so we were really lucky to have you on our CRE Chat for International Women's Day. And this is actually, Casey and I, this is, one of our favorite chats because, one of our end goals with the CRE Chat is to uplift women and help kind of shine a light on women in our industry. So, Diane, you've always been very vocal about that. And we appreciate you for that, because I think, what we always say is it starts with a conversation, right? So we need to be talking about this stuff. So, well, thank you for joining us today. And this is not a typical podcast. We typically do a recap of our CRE chats, but we're going to actually pivot a little bit because, as Casey noted right before we hit the record button, we did this CRE Chat on March the 17th, and then it was like a day or two before we all hit quarantine. So a lot has changed for women in the industry since this pandemic started, and we think it's important to highlight that.
Yeah, that's great. It's been a very rocky road for especially those women with young children. I'm so thankful that I have college age child to deal with, because I told him, had he been younger during this, I don't know if he would have seen his next birthday. It would have been a little tough, especially as a single parent. So this work at home, in some sense, it should be better for women, but it's still hard because of the child care and the schools and the companies not working with the caregiving parent, the main parent. And I did read a stat that 1/3 in dual income couples, 1/3 of the women say that they have full responsibility for the child's education and care. And 1/10 of the men said they did. So there's a lot of women that it's split, but there's a really group that's doing its own, and that doesn't include single parents.
Right. That's a staggering stat. And I would say I probably fall into that. I don't think it's like, I think it's more by choice, being a mom and wanting to make sure that my kids have the best education, but I do fall into that boat of having young children. And I think we need to get into that. But let's back up a little bit and talk about, our first question on the chat was, why is it important to encourage gender equality in CRE? Like, let's start there. Let's start at a high level and work our way down.
Well, I think my best answer is, what do your clients look like? Okay, it's not only the traditional makeup of the CRE brokerage community, which when I joined was 60 years old, white male, and that was probably 70%. I feel that that's changing, and it's got to change because that's what the clients change, and that's really important to get the best value. And I also think there's been so many studies. When I did the diversity study for SVN, we couldn't find a single study that said the diversity and inclusion of gender and ethnicities and everything else. It always led to innovation. So there were no studies repeating that. So I think it's like you're going to get better solutions for clients, better solutions, especially I would say amplified right now when companies have to be innovative for their clients. I think those who are not trained in the same school of thought for the past 30 years add a lot of value. So I'm talking about young people. This is a time for young people to get in this business, and they are more inclusive generation to start with. So I have real hopes. This is why I feel like I could walk away a little bit from commercial real estate. I never will, because I love commercial real estate, but I feel like I can walk away because I can pass the torch over to young women like yourselves who are making it, but we need to support you better during this time period.
Right. Yeah. It's a tough time. And, I know you said it's a good time for people to get in the business, but it's also, it's a little bit of a scary time as well. Just with the unknown in the business and how COVID's affecting the real estate markets. But there were so many great answers about gender equality. And let me backtrack a little, because I think, Casey and I, we are always so excited to see how diverse our participants are in our chat, in our Women in CRE chat. There are so many men in the business that support diversity and encourage it and have lifted all of us up in this business. So, I think a lot of these guys, Cameron Smerantz said, not only is it just the right thing to do, it promotes thought diversity at the executive level, which is exactly what you said. So I think we all recognize that it's important. But one of our questions was, how do we do it? How do we achieve that diversity?
It has to be intentional. The leadership has to intentionally look, and I think, and it has to be visual too. I feel like I just went and reviewed the top 150 tweeters list and the diversity and inclusiveness, and the women, two of the three here today at the top of the ladder. I mean, that would have been unheard of 5 or 10 years ago. And so this actually I want to loop back to the COVID thing. If companies aren't supporting their women right now, whether it's commercial real estate or other industries, you all are communicators. We're communicators because we've had to be, and we've communicated outside of our firms. There's been studies that women's networks extend outside of their firms because they have to. They can't depend on their internal firm to have enough women or others to support them and sponsor them, so they have to look outside. So I really hope companies realize that that's an added value that other groups bring to the table, especially during times like this. This is when collaboration matters across all sorts of industry. And I feel like that group that shows up each week for CRE chat is the epitome of that group. And the men that night were fantastic.
They were.
Andy Tarzi, and I made some new friends that I follow now because I really love their contributions. And a lot of them were raised by working moms, which is fantastic.
Oh, yes, I know. Casey, who was the poster who talks about his working mom? Is it Boone?
Is it Conrad as well?
I mean, there were several of the guys who said, I was raised by a working mother, and that made a lasting impression on them. So that to me as a working mother just really, hit home.
And I find it a generational thing, yes.
And I find it really interesting that how diverse our participants in CRE chat are, and just as we had mentioned, are so supportive of women in the industry. But does that also tie in with them being proactive and being online and on social media? Would we see that same support from people who are not as active on social media?
Well, I do think I will interject here because I do think a lot of the people on the social media in social media networks are more the thought leaders. So I do feel like there's a little bit of bleed over in what they're saying because these are also leaders in their company, but I'll let Diane address that as well.
You went where I was going to
Yeah.
go. These are folks who are looking at the future of business. These are folks who are looking at being in the know. And as much as people say, I don't do the social media, I don't do the Twitter.
Uh-oh. So Diane just froze, I think.
Okay. So I've never had this happen.
We've had a few glitches, but not a complete freeze.
Yeah, well, I'm sure she will be right back. But yeah, I think she kind of hit the nail on the head. I mean, these are leaders in the company, in their companies, and they're the ones. I mean, we have CEOs of national real estate firms participating in these chats, and top producers, top brokers, top thought leaders. So C-suite individuals in their companies that are really helping to change the face of CRE. Another one that comes to mind, Robert Thornburg. He was the leader of SR Global. I think he's been a huge supporter of us. I've just seen it kind of firsthand with how he supported us in CRE chat and lifted us up. So I think there's also leaders in the in organizations and groups that membership organizations that are and SOR has a female president right now. So so I'm thankful that there is a focus on the importance of women in CRE. Here's Diane back.
Oh, gotta unmute her.
I hope you kept going, and I'm sorry. This is the hazards of working from home. You know, sometimes the internet goes out. Yeah, so I am back on a backup hotspot here. So welcome to Maine.
Well, actually, this is probably a good transition for us to talk about, since you mentioned that W word, WFH, work from home. Let's talk about COVID and how, so we had this chat and then we all kind of went into quarantine, went into our homes. And then now that was back in March, and now we face kind of the uncertainty of what COVID would do in the business. But now I think as we're transitioning into August and, schools were out for the summer. And I think that's kind of a big issue with working women and how women in CRE are being affected by COVID. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. First of all, I want to say we're not working from home. We're at home working.
Yes.
I think this is a lot of us are not necessarily here by choice. I've always worked on and off from working from home. And I think that flexibility needs to be done. I think the problem is there was an article that said it really well. It said we're all having to work as if we didn't have kids, or we're having to parent as if we didn't work. And it's exacerbated in this. The problem is, I think companies that transition to virtual that want to do the same playbook they have in person can't do that. The fundamentals can stay the same, but you might have to think about different tools and different ways to use it, and we can talk about that in a minute. I think the schools, you can't just take the existing curriculum and put it online. And that's not working. I mean, we are not trained teachers. We are not trained educators, and we can I think they should follow the kids' curiosity, and that would keep them engaged more, and that would free up everybody's. But we also have the issue with not everybody has the space or the broadband or the work. I mean, it's creates other problems. If two working parents are home and they both have conference calls and the kid has to be on a class online, even for the most first world overprivileged family, it does create some issues. So it's a lie to say that this is just a women's issue. This is a company, school, parents, both parents, community issue. So, how are you balancing it?
Oh gosh. Well, we had this talk. I mean, I could go on and on, but I think the brunt of the whole school decision we are a dual working parent household. And so when our schools right now, the kids are supposed to be starting remote. I didn't choose, there was an online option. I didn't choose that. I wanted my kids to be in person. But with us starting remote, that really forced me to make a quick decision just in a couple of weeks of how are my kids, are they gonna, I was, during the pandemic, I was home. We all were with them. My husband was an essential worker. So it was me and the kids, and me, like you said, we're not teachers. And so, and me trying, I'm definitely not a good teacher. And so I kind of learned by experience those 3 months that I'm probably not the best at overseeing my children's education. So, you know, it was.
That's okay. You're not supposed to be. We can't be everything.
Yeah. No, we can't. And I recognize that. So, you know, luckily I was able to pivot and choose private school. But I think I've been on a soapbox lately, Diane, about, I think this topic is really important to me because I've heard of women leaving the workplace, and I've heard of, you know, women feeling like they have to make a choice between their career and educating their kids. And I think there are alternatives. And what I don't want to see is a loss of women in our field when we've made so much progress over the last decade.
Yeah, when you said that yesterday when we were chatting, that really hit me. I'm like, because I feel like I'm walking away from a different industry that I came to and that I've experienced for 20 years. The last 4 or 5 have been completely different. I mean, I was fortunate to work at a firm that gave me 100% support, and the women 100% support. And you all have found places that do that too. So I think that's, that really hit me that we're going to have women leave. But I feel like in sales, it's results driven. So I think if nobody's at the office, then FaceTime counts a little less. But again, I go back to what we were saying at the beginning, is women are good communicators. Look at you two holding a podcast. Look at, you know, the women at the top of the social media list. I mean, I think that was something in the 2007 to 2013 space. I actually, in 2007, launched the first social network for businesswomen in the US. All I got was sued by Mark Zuckerberg. But yeah, he was a jerk then, and still is. So that was it. But the working women at the time didn't embrace it, and I'm like, wait, this is new. We can dominate this. We're communicators. We talk. We write. The mommy bloggers, and I mean that in a positive sense, really managed to take it off, but the businesswomen did not. So right now, I'm seeing in our industry that the women are really driving the conversation, and they're being inclusive. And I think that that is a basis that companies in CRE need to recognize, and they need to support that strength and the time when everybody's out of the office. I think the ability to multitask, I mean, none of us multitask as much as we think, as well as we like to think we do, but under the pressures that we've always been under, with a little help, I think women can be the stars. But communities, companies, and schools have to have conversations with the working parents. I mean, I had raised my kid in a school district that did not acknowledge that there were any working parents or working moms. And that was very hard because they had to change their computer system to have 2 names to contact instead of just 1, because it was just the mom's name that defaults in there. It was that backwards. They let them out at 2:00 every, Wednesday or something. It was like another half day. Are you kidding me? So the schools have never worked with working parents, let alone working moms. And so I think this is a time to innovate.
Yes, especially in this. Well, yes. Companies and schools. And I think also, as you talk, Diane, it's interesting that, so we are at home working now. And so I have seen maybe a positive outcome of the thought that work can be, instead of FaceTime, a little bit more flexible, where if you have to go run an errand or you have a child and you need to do this or that, and maybe you don't absolutely have to be sitting at your desk in the office from 8 to 5 every day. So perhaps it's a positive outcome of everything that's happened.
I mean, I went into this as thinking positively that this is going to benefit women when the men get to experience it too. But I even had a back and forth with somebody that thinks business is going to go, yesterday on Twitter, that thinks business is going to go exactly back to how it was as soon as we're done with it. I don't think so, but the difference is, and there was a New York Times article about how working from home has failed, but you know what? Only certain people were working from home, and a lot of them were the least empowered people asking to work from home, and FaceTime was defined as in the office and at the after hours events. One challenge for the commercial real estate industry, especially I would say the title companies and some of these other ones, if you don't have a differentiating proposition, and you're still your sales model was to wine and dine and take people to sports events, you got to rethink your whole plan. And that's something that you need people who haven't been able to do business that way to be part of the leadership team to say, look, we can do business a different way. We can be more informative online. We can have one-on-ones. We can do different things, use the technology. So that's a technology is available now that we didn't have when we were trying to work from home in the early years.
That is an incredible point. I think I'm about to, once we get off this podcast, I'm going to tweet it out because yes, women haven't been able, we're usually not on, Casey and I talk about this a lot. We're not on the golf course.
You've had to build businesses alternative ways. So who do you want on your leadership team? Those who have had to do it differently. So that's my goosebumps. I hope it's going to work for women. And I think for those leaders that recognize that, it will. The other thing is we have better technology now, like we're using Zoom with screen share. So when some of us were working at home before, we were at a disadvantage. We weren't there to talk about something, but now we can work online. I'm actually the renewable energy company I'm working with, a bunch of young scientists in their 20s. They forced me on Slack, and now I see it because as you were saying, sometimes you have to run errands and you have to do things. When we're working online, it's asynchronous communication. Like you might drop something and pick it up later. Email's not real good for that, which I never understood Slack until I was forced to do it with this company. And now I can go back and pick up threads and conversations and all the documents are there. And I think companies that embrace the more collaborative software, they're going to have better outcomes because people aren't going to be lost out of the conversation. They're going to be more engaged. So I think on the one hand, the technology is there for us to learn it. And I think if the women can learn it who are in the leadership roles and enforce it in the companies, it will benefit everybody.
And Diane, going back to your wine and dine analogy, Melissa, during quarantine, BizNow, I think, quoted you in an article, and you say this all the time, if you're not on social media, you're invisible. And they use that as like the heading and the title of their article. Right when quarantine happened, that Diane, you can't go to sporting events. A lot of the golf courses were closed. How are you connecting with your clients? And some people were a bit lost in doing that.
Right. I feel like I was seeing the women online using, and it might have been you all and some of the other women on there using tablets to show spaces, and and right out there. I think I can throw out Tommy Jo Lynch was right out there with her mask and showing space, big open industrial space. She didn't miss a beat, So I feel like there's opportunity there, and I do want to have one other benefit that could come out of this if we all work together here, is that in times of crisis, that's when women get leadership roles. Women CEOs often come like Mary Barra at the car company. You get it when they've tried all the other traditional sources and the company's in trouble. Like, okay, we'll try a woman now. I know there's one CEO I talked to at a large multifamily residential company out of Texas, and I asked, how did she go from COO to CEO? Because, and she goes, well, I waited them to try 5 different men. And then they realized that I'm probably the only one that knows everything. So, it was a patience game. But I think in times of crisis, women can catapult into leadership roles, but they're often going to be in troubled situations. So I think giving them more support, not less support, would be very key here. I think that's because, like we talked about, it's a different level of thinking. We had to do business differently. So when everybody does, that's who you want on your team.
And
Go
ahead, Melissa.
I was going to say that, that kind of goes back to the importance of women in leadership and the impact we can have during times of change or difficulty, networking, being able to multitask. So all those things are emerging out of this COVID crisis. So let's come full circle. That means we need to be seeking out women more so now than ever in commercial real estate.
Absolutely. And I also, I know we're talking about Women's Day here, but I'm seeing some recent really good progress with people of color. And I think they're representing markets that bring a different conversation to the table, especially now with all that's going on. And so I think that this could be a very exciting time to be in commercial real estate once people get over the shockwaves and realize we have to shift. You know, some of those office spaces might have to turn into badly needed housing. You know, we talked about some secondary markets are going to shine. I think, Melissa, you're in one, Nashville. Columbus is the other one that's brought up. And we're going to see different work styles, work plans. So I always felt like commercial real estate professionals are the stewards of their community, and they help tell the story. So if you're in a secondary market right now, this is your time to shine. Because there are people that, one, couldn't afford the rents, and now companies are willing to think about remote work. So you could live somewhere you want to live and can afford to live.
That's
So
such an
off topic.
excellent point. No, it was excellent. I think I could just sit here and listen to you talk for hours.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I am so like all smiles, just like I said, when I'm, you know, I could toss the baton off because it's not just you two. When I scroll through my feed with all the commercial real estate people I follow, I just today read a story about a young new graduate from my alma mater who got a great opportunity at Suffolk Construction. You know, and it's just to see that happen and to see the company celebrating it out and promoting that. I mean, we've come a long way.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think it's thanks to women like you have kind of led the way and shone a light on the next generation.
Right.
So, that goes back to one of our questions that we had on the Twitter chat back in March was, how can CRE leaders help support and encourage women?
I think one of the best things you can do is, if you're managing people, check in and have a conversation. Just say, what is it? What can I do? I mean, one of the things that I did years ago to help one parent that we had was she had to take her daughter to something. I can't even remember what it was, but she, like, and the only time that there was a specialist doctor or something like that. And I said, okay, tell me what those times are. And she was worried that I was going to report to HR. I said, and we're going to block it off, and I'm not going to ever hold company-wide meetings during that time. So I think if companies can have those honest conversations and not put parents feeling defensive, like they don't want to share that way, I have to do this at this hour, and realize that you can work around that, because we are working longer because we're not commuting. Mm-hmm. So you can extend the hours, which is also not great when work is 24/7, but with kids, it can't be 24/7 because they're right there in your face. But yeah, so I think if you can do something like, if you're a manager, have a conversation. Use the software that's available. Use the tools. If you as the leader don't use it, then nobody else will. And I think that's the collaborative software, Zoom, whatever it is. I think that's a really important thing. We have tools now that we didn't have before. You know, and whatever help you can provide your employees. Could you imagine losing all these women, then having to replace them with what? With who? No. You're losing, that was a skill set that might excel if you give them a little support. So this is my plea to all the companies in commercial real estate and our clients in every other industry. You have made so many strides. And as you said, Melissa, it would hurt to lose it now. But for all those women who feel they have to step aside, hey, I did it. I did it. I had to. At a certain time, I had to put my child first. And it took me a little while to go back, but with the help of other strong women, I was able to do that and do it with style. So I think keep on having these conversations, even when they're tough conversations. That's what you do.
And excellent. Okay, one more. I don't even want to. I don't even want to end this. I know we need to. But one more question, just for the women out there seeking a career path in CRE. What advice would you give them in 2 minutes or less?
2 minutes or less. Okay, find your allies, male and female. And I think that's just really, and all ages, all generations, have a diverse group of your own personal board of advisors, because you're going to need them when time gets tough. So I think that's the number one thing you can do. Learn the technology. Technology is not going away. It's coming back. As much as people can still, I joke, do business with a Rolodex and a flip phone, because their contacts have been with them for 30, 40 years, but they're going to retire. And this is probably going to push a lot of people to retire by year end. So there's going to be opportunities. But know where the industry is going. Be flexible with your asset class type. If you're in commercial real estate sales, you know, asset classes go up and down. You know, single family rentals are up, multifamily is going to still be around. So learning adaptable skills is huge. So I think those were a couple of things that I really feel important for women. and anyone in commercial real estate starting out right now. So
that's excellent advice. So I guess we have to end here. Unfortunately, we could talk for another hour, I know, and I'll probably call you. I think I found my next mentor in the business, Diane.
I can ask, you know what, one thing we're going to end this because I know you have some male fans, we'll be honest. The one thing they can do is stand up and call it out when you see it, so that people, not just so that you're helping, which does help, but so people know who their allies are. This got brought up with a psychology professor, and somebody had called a scientist out for saying something very sexist on stage, and they didn't want to publicize the bad guy's name, but they wanted to publicize the guy who did it so women know who they can turn to. So this is a way to be a hero, you know, so speak up and keep supporting fabulous women like Casey and Melissa, and listen to CRE Chat. So thanks for having me.
All right. Well, I don't know how to end this just because I'm ready to keep going and keep the conversation going, which I know we will on Twitter. We're always discussing and promoting the women. Diane, as you mentioned, Ken Ashley's list of commercial real estate influencers, top 150, the top 3 on the list are women. Melissa, number 3, number 2, myself, and Natalie made the number 1 spot. So like you said, 3 or 5 years ago, that may not have been the case. So these conversations, diversity, inclusion, and gender equality are definitely something that I think we will be seeing a lot more of in the future. And thank you again for being our guest host and joining us on this podcast and always participating in our chats with us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Diane.
So next CRE Chat August 20th, and follow that CRE Chat hashtag on Twitter, and we'll see you at 7:30 Central towards the end of August.
Bye.
Bye, guys.